You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and as I was searching crime headlines this week, it popped on one website that Aidan Kearney, you'll know him as TurtleBoy. Well, Aidan Kearney is facing charges of witness intimidation in connection with Karen Reed's 2 trials. Okay, just as a reminder, Karen Reed was accused of killing her boyfriend John O'Keefe by backing into him with her Lexus on a snowy, alcohol-filled night in January of 2022. Now, Reed's first trial in April of 2024 ended in a mistrial with a starkly divided hung jury. 1 year later, in April of 2025, her second trial began, and after 7 weeks, Karen Reed was found not guilty on her most serious of charges. Now, it was during these 2 trials that Aidan Kearney, again, remember he's TurtleBoy, well, he became known to many true crime followers outside of the Boston area. Aidan had a presence far before Karen Reed. Aidan, who is now 43 years old, was raised by his mother, who is an attorney, and his father in Worcester, Massachusetts. After graduating from South High Community School, Aidan attended the University of Massachusetts Amherst. His education led him to teaching, and he began working at Shepherd Hill Regional High School in Dudley, Massachusetts, this for about 11 years. As a hobby, Aidan started an online blog called aidanfromworcester.com. This blog was filled with posts that meandered through politics and sports and culture. And eventually, Aidan left teaching and started a website called TurtleBoy Sports. TurtleBoy comes from a nickname for the Burnside Fountain in Worcester, so as a suggestion from a student, Aidan began using the name TurtleBoy. Well, finally, that website morphed into TB Daily News, and that happened in 2017. Now, it's very easy to label Aidan as an agitator, and if that is how you feel about him, that's totally fine. But Aidan, quote, agitated in other areas besides the Karen Reed trial. In 2018, Aidan covered some alleged misconduct within the Massachusetts State Police. This all started over uncovered perceived drug dealing and money laundering. Aidan covered the hiring of an officer, and he went into it extensively, and that led to new background checks for hiring that were implemented within the department. So some say, due to the exposure that Aidan brought to the cases, there were changes. Aidan was also credited with the first to publish the breaking news of Massachusetts state troopers who faced disciplinary actions for including incriminating details in an arrest report concerning a judge's daughter. Okay, follow me here. I'm going to give you an update in a minute on what is up with Aidan's charges that, center around intimidation with the Karen Reed case. We'll get to that because that whole thing's kind of falling apart. But as I was looking into Aidan, I couldn't not look into the controversies that are Boston law enforcement and, to a greater extent, Massachusetts State Police. So let me lay out some of what has been uncovered in Massachusetts. Back in 2017, WCVB reported on a trooper who was suspended without pay. Trooper Eric Chin was investigated for all the hours he claimed he worked in the previous year. Trooper Chin, for the second year in a row, had been paid over $131,000 in overtime pay. Eric Chin's base pay was about $100,000, and then he was paid over $131,000 in overtime, and then he also figured out how to be paid $66,000 in other bonus pay. If you're doing the math, that's over $300,000 in 2016 as a state trooper. That's a hefty salary for 1 year. Then, in October of 2017, that investigation revealed how Eric Chin was accomplishing all of the extra pay. And his lawyer said multiple troopers were taking advantage of the loophole. Okay, here's how it went down. The Section E Department, that is the portion of the Massachusetts Police Department that is assigned to the Massachusetts Turnpike. Those troopers would manipulate traffic tickets to boost their overtime pay. So basically, the The traffic ticket would read a different time than when they were working, and that would be their cover for their additional overtime pay. Then 1 month later, that story that Aiden, TurtleBoy, said he broke, well, that came to light. So here's how that one went down. State troopers Ryan Scavor and Ali Ree each filed federal lawsuits within 2 days of each other. The two troopers were separately telling almost identical stories. The suits alleged that the top commanders at the department pressured them to alter the arrest report of Ali Bubad. Ali Bubad is the daughter of prominent Worcester County Judge Timothy Bubad. The troopers alleged they were told to falsify the report by removing comments that Ali Bubad had made during her DUI stop. Trooper Scavor was halfway through an evening shift on October 16th of 2017 when a seemingly routine call came in about a car crash. On a highway outside Worcester, Ali Bubad had slammed her Toyota Corolla into a guardrail. She and her passenger had survived the crash, but Trooper Scavor said the 30-year-old woman reeked of alcohol when he arrived on the scene. A search of her car turned up a, quote, heroin kit containing needles and a metal spoon. During the stop, Ali Bubad allegedly revealed that she had performed sexual acts to pay for those drugs in the car, and that if Trooper Scavor wanted, she would perform sexual acts on him in exchange for leniency in the whole situation. Trooper Scavor did not accept her offer, and while he was transporting Ali Bubad to the jail, she offered up that her father was a judge. Scavor said he didn't really believe her, so he just dropped her off at the jail, finished his report, filed his report, and went home after his shift. 2 days later, on his day off, a fellow state trooper awoke him with a knock at his door and a demand that he immediately go to the police barracks in Holden, Massachusetts. When he arrived at the barracks, he was told by supervisors, okay, that's plural, there's more than one. He was told by supervisors to delete the negative and derogatory statements in the report on Ali Bubad's arrest. Now, Trooper Scavor, he reluctantly did finally delete and did as he was told, but the story of the editing had already made the rounds through several law enforcement employees. And then the story landed on TurtleBoy's desk, and he broke the story to the public. Now, the lawsuit listed that Trooper Scavor was handed a marked up copy of his already filed police report. There were red slashes and proposed changes everywhere. Scavor said he told the union representative who was in the meeting with the supervisors that the changing of the document was, quote, morally vacant. The union representative told the supervisors in that meeting that it must be a direct order if they expected Scavor to change the document. Scavor was then told it was a direct order by, quote, all the bosses. Scavor was then threatened that he would be charged with insubordination if he didn't comply, which might lead to his firing. Now, the other trooper, Ali Ree, well, her lawsuit said nearly identical claims since she was paired with Scavor for duty that night. After the lawsuits were filed, State Police Colonel Richard McKeon abruptly retired, and a state ethics probe was launched. Now, Ali Bubad pled guilty to her charges, and she served 14 months probation. She also completed a residential treatment program for her abuse issues, so we're all finished with her. But the big guy in charge, he retires abruptly, and a new commander, Kerry Gilpin, he's chosen. On his first day on the job, Gilpin launches an internal investigation. 2 months into that investigation, the department launches another investigation into the wacky overtime pay situation. That second investigation uncovered another black eye for the department. Okay, are we keeping track here? We've got the overtime scandal. We've got the lawsuits over the scandal of the changing of the document of the judge's daughter. Now we've got a new black eye. Through the review of employment records, it was found that Trooper Leah Ganduso was working there under what could best be described as weird circumstances. Trooper Ganduso, just a year earlier, had testified as a co-conspirator in a federal drug case. That's right, she was one of the bad guys. And they then turned around and awarded her by hiring her as a trooper in the department. And get this, Trooper Ganduso lived with one of the top officials who ordered Ali Boubad's arrest report to be scrubbed of the not-so-tasteful details. When the investigation revealed that Trooper Ganduso should not have been hired, that forced her boyfriend to abruptly retire from his top brass position. We've got lots of abrupt retiring going on here. Then 1 month later, the state police announced that 20 troopers were under investigation for the whole overtime scandal thing. See how we're overlapping here? Eventually, more troopers were investigated and several dozen were implicated in the overtime pay debacle. Now, it was discovered that 14 troopers had earned more in overtime pay than they had earned in base pay, and that 54 troopers had earned enough overtime pay that they were being paid a total of more than $200,000 per year as a state trooper. Remember, this is 2016 and 2017. That's a lot of money for that position. Now, the investigation also revealed a program where troopers were paid extra money. This was bonus money if they decided to drive their own cars to work. Now, I'm sure this was so that the trooper vehicles weren't being driven to their homes and getting those extra miles and wear and tear put on them. But the program was ending up costing the department an average of $13,000 per employee. So see, these troopers were getting an extra roughly $13,000 a year just to drive their own car to and from work. And some of them were still driving patrol vehicles, and they were just saying they were driving their own cars in order to collect on the bonus pay. Now, the overtime scandal, it also revealed something else. It revealed that the Massachusetts police were doling out contracts to specified towing companies. Kind of an I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine situation. The contracts were then revised when the paybacks were discovered. Okay, it gets worse. Then it was revealed in the investigation that Denise Ezekiel, she was the director of payroll for the Massachusetts Police Department. Well, it was revealed she was misappropriating money she had control over, basically handing out paid leave and vacation time when it wasn't deserved. Denise also abruptly tried to retire, but my source material says she was fired instead. Okay, 2 months after all of that, the entire Troop E, the ones who were skimming the overtime money, well, that entire troop was just dissolved. They just got rid of it. And 1,000 state police cruisers were retrofitted with GPS systems so that they could be tracked while they were on shift. Okay, everything I just told you happened over a 2-year stretch, and it really put Aiden on the map in Boston. And then in 2022, he tackled the Karen Reed case, which obviously led to more uncovering of area law enforcement misconduct. So let's dive into that. We'll start with Canton Police Department. An April 2025 audit that was ordered by the city documented evidence handling and scene management errors in the early hours of the morning of John O'Keefe's death. These were things like the first responders not photographing the body where it was lying, and then critical witness interviews not being recorded. And one of the big ones for me, no police presence was maintained at the home where John O'Keefe was found deceased. Basically, the crime scene was left unattended after the event and while secondary searches were being handled. There was never film or police presence at some of these things. Now, I reviewed this audit report. It's 184 pages long. The report scolds the Canton PD for not being consistent in their investigations and documentation methods. And although the report found that all misconduct by officers was addressed, I was left wondering, if you don't know that misconduct happened, how do you then address it? Meaning, you don't know what you don't know. So, of course, when misconduct is brought forward, you address it, but how much of the misconduct was not caught? Now, the Canton PD audit found that there was no credible evidence of tampering with the evidence collected in the murder of John O'Keefe by anyone associated with the Canton PD. I felt like that was also a little bit of a cover, that maybe it wasn't anybody in Canton PD who tampered with it, but maybe the evidence was collected and somebody else tampered with it. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Now, as a side note here, Following the conclusion of the Karen Read trial, an independent survey found that only 4% of registered voters in Canton support the leadership of the Canton PD and the District Attorney Michael Morrissey. That's pretty grim. Well, then there was the lead investigator on the Karen Read case, Michael Proctor. Now, we've talked about him in previous episodes. Remember, this is the guy who sent the texts about Karen Read where he called her names and said he was disappointed he hadn't found any naked pics of her on her phone. Well, after the first trial, Detective Proctor was relieved of his duties and was transferred out of the department. He was suspended without pay for several months as an internal investigation was conducted. Then, just before the second trial, Michael Proctor was fired by the Massachusetts State Police. Proctor's direct supervisor, Sergeant Yuri Buchanek, was suspended and then transferred to an administrative role with the Massachusetts State Police as a result of his connecting actions with Proctor. Okay, so we've got those two guys who were in trouble. So what about Kevin Albert? Oh my gosh, do I even dare get into the family connections within the Canton and the MSP and the Boston PD and all of the law enforcement? Roughly about 24 people are connected with family and job relations in the Karen Read case. We've got brothers, spouses, romantic partners, sons, co-workers. Well, Kevin Albert was a detective in the case, and Brian Albert's home was the ground zero for John O'Keefe's death. Kevin Albert was placed on leave after his testimony in the trial revealed his somewhat shady doings, and eventually he faced only 3 days worth of suspension, and that was done without pay. Now, peripherally, in these investigations, it seems alcohol is at play a lot, especially in the Karen Read issues. I'm seeing lots of drinking while on the clock being referenced all over the place. Do with that what you will. I also have only touched on 2 portions of what many people are saying is a very corrupt police force in the state and other areas of Massachusetts. So, what about TurtleBoy and his charges? Well, he was very provocative in his coverage of the Karen Read trial. He would film himself confronting potential witnesses and then post those videos. And this led to him being charged with a total of 16 counts of witness intimidation or other related crimes in 3 separate cases. Now, Aiden has pled not guilty to all of those counts in those 3 cases. But last week, Judge Michael Doolin allowed Special Assistant DA Robert Cosgrove to remove himself from one of Aiden's cases. See, Cosgrove has been pulled into a civil suit that involves Aiden and an alleged girlfriend of Cosgrove's, so he is now compromised and must step away from the criminal case involving Aiden. Now, the DA's office was given 30 days by the judge to assign a new prosecutor, but it's not that simple. Another prosecutor might not take this case up. The case is so tainted, to just be honest, and because Cosgrove and another prosecutor share history with the same romantic partner in the civil case, well, that means that prosecutor can also not be involved in Aiden's case. Again, these people really need to broaden their relationship pool there in Massachusetts. And this case where Cosgrove was removed, well, it seems to be leaning that no other prosecutor will touch it. So the case might be dead in the water. We might be reading the tea leaves wrong. Maybe it will be reinstated. I don't know. But as of right now, it's paused, waiting for a prosecutor. Now, Robert Cosgrove is still involved in the other 2 criminal cases against Aiden, like I said. Those ones have problems as well, because 6 of the 16 counts had to be dismissed. Those 6 counts involved Michael Proctor and Sergeant Yuri Buchanek. They were removed because the grand jury testimony that initiated those charges did not have valid evidence attached. All right, so those other 2 cases with the charges removed, they're still in their preliminary hearing stages. In one of the cases, Aiden is accused of standing outside of D&E Pizza and Subs. Okay, that restaurant's located in Canton, and it's owned by Chris Albert, the father to Colin Albert. Now, security cameras captured Aiden peering through the glass of the storefront and speaking to the camera for about a half a minute. Allegedly, he said to the camera something along the lines that it was Chris Albert who killed John O'Keefe. Allegedly, he followed all of that up with this phrase, "I don't want to scare you." Well, Aiden's attorneys contend that the phrasing that Aiden used was not wise, but it also isn't criminal. Now, Aiden has already been acquitted in a different case, not any of the three that I was just talking about. This is a completely different case. This one was earlier on. Aiden was charged with violating a restraining order connected to the coverage outside the courthouse of the Karen Reed trial. So that one's just done with. He was acquitted, all's well. So the next inflection point in Aiden's cases will occur in December at a pre-trial hearing. I'll follow all of that up when it happens. Now, all of this about Aiden makes it seem like he's the one always agitating, which is really sort of true. It's his brand, but it isn't always true. Aiden was assaulted near the end of Karen Reed's first trial when he was out to dinner with his girlfriend near the bar that was part of the trial video evidence in Karen's trial. How many times can I say trial in one sentence? Okay, 2 people were charged with assault and battery in that case. And then shortly after the first trial, Aiden found a dead turtle hanging outside of his parents' home in Worcester. Okay, what I covered here was a lot and very all over the place, and I only talked about it for about 20 minutes. I think that barely scratches the surface about the potential corruption in Massachusetts law enforcement. If you're from this area, let all of us know what you think. I already know that you guys are pretty much divided in half on whether Karen was guilty or not, and you're also kind of divided in half on TurtleBoy's behavior. Is his behavior too much? Is it too provocative? Or was that exactly what that trial needed to expose the misdeeds of law enforcement? Tell me what you think. Now, of course, I need to bring you the update to the Laken Snelling case out of Kentucky. Big shout out to the Kentucky Kernel. That's a publication out of Kentucky. They are the ones that provided all of this information I'm about to share with you. Okay, remember, Laken was the member of the University of Kentucky stunt team, kind of like a cheerleader, and she gave birth to her baby boy in her apartment. She wrapped that baby boy in a towel and then in a garbage bag and left that baby in the closet, and then she eventually went out to breakfast. Okay. Her roommates found the baby and called 911. After all of that was revealed, Laken was charged with abuse of a corpse, tampering with physical evidence, and concealing the birth of an infant. But that might not be all she's charged with, because in a very graphic article by the publication Kentucky Kernel, like I said, new details about the death of the infant have been revealed. It seems Laken Snelling told medical staff at the University of Kentucky Labor and Delivery Unit that her baby displayed, quote, a little bit of fetal movement at the time of the birth, and that the baby boy did whimper, which led her to, quote, guess the baby was alive. Okay, here's how the affidavit reports that the morning of the birth went. At 4 a.m. on August 27th, Laken allegedly said the baby fell onto the floor from her vaginal canal. Laken then said she wasn't sure if the baby was breathing or alive. Laken said she remained awake until about 4:30, but that she then fell asleep on top of the baby. She even references she might have passed out. She said when she awoke, she got up and could see that the baby was, quote, turning blue and purple. She said at that time she felt like the baby was probably dead, so she wrapped the baby up like a, quote, burrito, and then she laid next to the baby. She acknowledged in the arrest affidavit that this gave her very little comfort. She then fell asleep again, and at 7:30 a.m., her alarm woke her up. She said she went to the kitchen and retrieved a black trash bag. She allegedly then took the baby, who's wrapped up like a burrito, in her words, and placed the baby in the trash bag. She then put the bundle in her closet. She told police she then took a shower to clean off the dried blood. After that, she cleaned up the blood in her room with paper towels, and she then placed the placenta in a Ziploc bag and put that in the trash bag with the baby in the closet. Now, by this point, Laken apparently looked at her Snapchat. There she saw a group Snapchat feed with her roommates, and they had started that chat at 4 a.m. That was about the time that they heard the noise coming from Lakin's room. Now, presumably, the noise of the baby hitting the floor started the Snapchat feed. Well, at 8:48 that morning, so just about 4.5 hours after the birth, Lakin tells her roommates in that Snapchat feed that the noise they heard was Lakin falling on the floor after she had gotten sick from some food she had eaten. She then told them she was leaving the apartment to go to the doctor. Lakin said she left the apartment intending to go to her scheduled 9:30 a.m. University of Kentucky class, but she told officers she wasn't feeling well, so instead she sat in her car for a bit and then went to McDonald's and got some breakfast. Now, during this time, her roommates had entered her room, discovered the baby, and then called 911. First responders arrived at about 10:30, and Lakin returned to her apartment shortly after that. That's when she was detained and interviewed by officers and eventually charged. Lakin has pled not guilty to her current charges, but like I said, if the baby was alive, and it can be shown through medical examination that the baby was born alive, then those charges will most likely change. Now, one other item from the Kentucky Kernel article. During the forensic audit of Lakin's phone, detectives found multiple searches pertaining to pregnancy, like images of labor and information about concealing a pregnancy. This is important because she presumably cannot claim she had no idea she was pregnant. The forensic audit also revealed that Lakin had taken photos that morning of her struggling through the labor of the baby. But she then went on and deleted those photos before her phone was apprehended by detectives. So let me know what you think about this case in the comments. And obviously, I'll be watching as it makes its way through the trial process and obviously for additional charges. And now to a case that broke on Thursday and then was solved hours later, sort of. Here's what happened. Marion County Sheriff's deputies were called to a shooting in Dunalon, Florida. This was about 4 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. Deputies reported that family members of 17-year-old Caden Spite had received texts from him stating he'd been shot by 4 Hispanic men in a van and then abducted. Deputies went to the scene where Caden had indicated that the shooting had happened, and all they found was his abandoned work truck with a bullet hole in the side of the truck. But Caden was nowhere to be found. And officials issued a Florida Amber Alert for Caden just hours later, revealing the concepts in that Amber Alert that 4 Hispanic men were potentially involved in the disappearance or abduction of Caden. But then by Friday morning, after reviewing evidence from surrounding businesses, it seemed that Caden had gone to a Walmart and purchased a red tent. He left the Walmart with his purchases on a black bicycle, so no truck and no men shooting at him. By 1 o'clock that day, Caden had been located safe in Williston, Florida, and as of now, it appears the entire text claims by Caden were just fabricated. Caden did work on his family blueberry farm and was involved, at least in his younger years, in a rodeo circuit. So that just gives you a little background on Caden. I truly hope Caden can get the help that he needs if this comes out that it was just 100% made up. I'll keep you updated. And finally, a quick update to a question by a loyal listener. They had heard that the singer David, remember that's spelled D, the number 4, VD. So David was implicated in another dead body being found in LA. All right, I did some searching. Remember, David is the singer who owns the Tesla that was searched in an impound lot of a Hollywood tow. When the Tesla was searched, 14-year-old Celeste Riva's dead body was found in the trunk. Celeste had been missing from her family home for more than a year and was credibly linked to David through video and photo evidence. Well, David has not been arrested for Celeste's murder, although his house was searched and he canceled all of his upcoming U.S. tour stops. All right, to answer the question, yes, a body was found at a different LA tow yard. It was located in a burned out Honda Civic at Al's Towing in South LA. However, LA police are saying the two incidents have no connection. And then internet rumors have circulated about infant remains being found near a house that has a connection to David. I don't know if this is the house that was searched in the Hollywood Hills. I have no idea, but those internet rumors have been running wild. And it seems that they're just that, rumors. There's no validity to that right now. However, it has been confirmed that David is moving out of his Hollywood home that was searched by police. And that home was also the home where the abandoned Tesla was located nearby and towed from. It has not been confirmed where David is now living. All right, as always, I'll keep watching this case. And now to comments on Thursday's episode. Almost exclusively, you guys said there would be no way that you could have hidden anyone in your home for 10 days without your mother or father knowing. So I asked my kids, and they said absolutely not. That me, as their mother, I knew way too much of the minor stuff they were trying to hide from me back then. How could they have gotten away with hiding an entire human for 10 days? Now, I also want to highlight Cassie's comment on YouTube. She reminded us all, in this case, of hiding an adult in your room for 10 days as a 12-year-old child, and also in the case of Celeste Rivas that I just mentioned. She reminds us children cannot consent to intimate acts. That's a fact, Cassie. Thanks for the reminder. All right. That's your Monday episode of Rise and Crime. Thank you for being here. Please share this episode with a friend or one of your favorites. It helps the podcast grow. So I really appreciate that. And send me your case suggestions. We love 5-star reviews and positive comments here at Oh No Media. You can like and follow us on all of our social media accounts at well. Those 3 podcasts are Murder with My Husband, Into the Dark, and Rise and Crime. Join me again on Monday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules. And keep safe out there.